So last week I showed you how to install urethane bushings to get a little bit firmer, sportier ride. Today I'm going to show you how to take out your rubber bushings and install rubber bushings if you want to go for more of the original flavor. It's a little bit different than doing the urethane bushings, so you stay tuned. You're going to want to watch this. So I've had this off for a few days, and every time I walked by it, I would shoot more oil on it to help myself out. You want to do that as much as you can, because a lot of times these are really rusted up and they can be a little bit of a bear getting apart. Looks like these aren't going to be too bad so far. You're just going to want to take your nuts off the end and the large washers right here. And then what we're going to do is, see this big fat kind of edge right here? What I'm going to do is I'm going to get a Sawzall and cut that off. You don't have a Sawzall, you can just use a hacksaw. You can use a die grinder too, it's a bit more messy. This whole job's a bit messy, so prepare for that. Don't do this in the living room probably. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. Then I'm going to get a drill bit and I'm going to drill in, and I'm going to get the rubber as weak as possible. I'll get a screwdriver in there and I'll keep pulling it out until I get all the rubber out of there basically. Now with all the rubber taken out, the shaft here will just come right on off like this. You're going to have these sleeves on the end, and these came off really nice and easy, but it is quite possible that yours are rusted on there really tough. If that is the case, you'll notice that there is a seam right here. And what you can do is just get a chisel and kind of hit it from this side and kind of hit it from that side. Get that seam to open up a lot, and then this will be coming off a lot easier for you, hopefully. If not, you're going to have to heat it and, you know, go on from there. But hopefully you'll have luck. And those sleeves come in the new bushing right here. Now what we've got is, you see this metal casing that's on the outside of this rubber bushing? That is still inside of our lower control arm right here. Now if you have a press machine, you can use those to press these out. You can also use one of these guys right here. You just have to make sure that you have ring enough to go around this edge right here, or you're going to have to grind it off. And also, if you're going to be using a press or this ball joint guy right here, one of the things you got to be careful of is that right here, if you were to try to press these ends right here, they can bend on you really easy. So what you got to do, if that's the case, is you get some pipe like this right here and you cut it the exact space right in between these two right here. Then you cut that in half and you place it in here, and then when you're pressing it out, you'll have the support in there to keep this from bending or collapsing on you. Now I don't want to use all that stuff because more than likely you don't have it either. So what I'm going to do is show you how to take it out if you've only got some basic tools. Now I've got a Sawzall here, but you could also use a die grinder, I suppose. You could use a hacksaw, it's going to take you longer. But basically what I'm going to be doing right here is I'm going to be weakening this casing as much as possible. So I'll try to cut the middle of it all the way out. I can take the end right here, I can grind that down with a grinder. I can do the same thing with the other side. Then with just the small amount of remnants I have left, a lot of times I can just use a small chisel and a hammer to get them out. Maybe I'll saw them a little bit to weaken them up a little bit more, but the main moral of the story is don't do any damage to the lower control arms. These ends right here, they're not as tough as you might think, so don't get too aggressive with it. Let me play with this for a while. Let's see what kind of luck we got. So before I cut this, I want you to notice on this bushing housing, that's the only thing we want to cut. Notice this little lip right here. When they punch this hole out of the control arm, that little lip is made. That has to stay there in order for support. So make sure you don't do any damage to that and cut on the inside edge of that. On this side right here, you'll notice it also has a lip, and we don't want to do any damage to that either. If you're going to be grinding this edge down, do not grind that lip off. So now we just have these little remnants right here and in the front and the back. Now this right here is a little dicey. If you're gonna go ahead and cut into this, it's gotta be real careful, and we gotta make sure we don't hit the control arm. So don't even try to cut all the way through this ring. Just try to cut enough to weaken it some. And I'll do a few spots in one area, and I'll flip it around, do the other, and weaken it up some. We'll see how easy it comes out or not. So the other side basically just fell out, but that may not happen for all the sides. This one here stuck in a little bit. So all I'm doing is just cutting a little relief cut in there, and I'll get a little relief cut or two in the top, and then I'll just get a chisel and a hammer, and I'm going to just try to knock that in where I did the cuts on. And you want to remember that the bushing went this way. I'm not going to try to push it that way. I'm going to try to push it this way. I might hammer on this side to get the relief in there some, but I'm going to try to hammer it out this way. So let's see. Yeah, there we go. So I just needed to tap it in some, make it a little bit smaller, came right on out. All right, I need to clean up these holes right here. Now, obviously, if I was going to be doing this to put on a truck, one of my customers' trucks, I'd get this sandblasted and powder coated before I put everything together. We've got time constraints, of course, today when we're doing our videos, so I'm just going to clean them up in the shaft right here where our new bushings are going to be going in. So that one there actually damn near falls in. The other side here, yeah, almost the same thing too. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and install these. Let me clean up a little bit and I'll show you how we do that. Now I'm ready to install my bushings. There's a couple of things I got to get set up first though. What I'm going to be doing is getting me some 2.5-inch exhaust pipe, and I'm going to be cutting it up so that I can place it as spacers in the proper place. If we don't have a spacer right here on our ears, these can bend when we're trying to install. So I take exhaust pipe, just cut it in the right length. I go ahead and install it. Now we don't have to worry about these crushing in. We've got a C-clamp or a ball joint press right here. These are relatively inexpensive, 50, 60 bucks I think, not too big of a deal. Another thing that I'm going to do is take another piece and only cut it at about 1/2 inch. Now the reason I'm doing that is because the rubber that's on the top right here, if I was trying to smash this down, then the rubber's just going to smash out. It's going to make me more difficult. So I'll take this ring and I'll put it right over the rubber so that when I'm pressing down on the casing and not the rubber, make the installation go a lot easier. Now this is what the bushing will look like more than likely when you get it, and you can see it has this black paint or covering on it. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll install it, and I'll try to get it to go in with my C-clamp and see how well it fits in. But normally it does not work. They're usually just a little bit too fat, and these have to fit in really firmly, but a lot of times they're so fat they won't even go in. So what we're going to do is a couple of different tricks. We're going to take these and we're going to put them in the freezer or a bag of ice, and we're going to leave them in there as long as possible, because when metal gets cold it shrinks. So that should make it easier to install. Also, I'll get some 400 grit emery cloth, and I'll just grind off a little bit of the casing covering and maybe a little bit of the casing too, and then I'll try it in, and then I'll gently try to install it, and I'll see if it feels like it's just locking up and not going to go in. I'll take off a little bit more, but I can't get too aggressive with it, because if it is too loose, then it's not going to hold in there correctly. So you don't get too aggressive and take off too much. So now we're going to see if this works correctly. I'm going to take my ball joint press right here, my C-clamps, and I'll simply set it right on here. I've also got me a another spacer for the other side to help press it in. One sec here. So you got to have one of these on both sides. That'll go about like that. Now first I'm just going to start with a ratchet and just gently try to get it to go in. And I'm feeling for it to, if it feels like it's going in, then I know I'm okay. But if it feels like it's jamming and I stopped, then I might want to take a little bit more metal off. So I'm going to see how it's going. It seems like it is okay. Now I'm going to get out my big guns here. And I'm just going to gently get this down. Okay, so that's pressed in. We want to make sure that our casing is nice and flush up against our control arm right here. Now what we're going to have to do is install our shaft. You can't use the ball joint clamp on both sides because once the shaft is in, you're not going to be able to get this on like this. So what we're going to do is we'll take our middle spacer, we'll put it in. If these get flopping around on you too much or anything, you can use zip ties to hold them, or just get some hose clamps and clamp them in. I can get this, install it here. My middle spacers. And then this one here, I'm going to get a zip tie on that just to hold it a little bit better for me. You could also use tape or hose clamps or anything like that. Zip ties close by. So now we are all set on this end. Here what we're going to be doing is we're going to make sure that this ring is back on here. So we've got support again on the outside of the casing. I'm going to put on my washer and I'll put on my nut. And I'm tightening this down. I'm not going to get crazy about the torque though, because this spacer is going to come back out. Now I'll make sure I have a spacer on the other side here. I'll get my washer on. I'll get my nut on. And then I'm just going to nice and gently start to screw this in. I'm checking to see if it's catching up, if it's getting on me uneven, if the ends right here are starting to warp or bend. Okay, and now I'm all the way flush. My bushing is in. I can go ahead and take this back apart, take out my spacers. I'll put my washers back on and I'll put my nuts back on. Now I'm not going to tighten these nuts down. I'm going to show you why in just a second here when I get all these spacers on and flip this around. So just give me 2 seconds here. So you can see how firm these can get stuffed in here after it's been torqued down and everything. So your spacers might be a little trouble coming out. But you can see if you had not put those in there, they would have definitely smushed in. So what I want you to notice now is on the lower control arm, there are 2 pinholes. And there we go. So Okay, so right here you can see there's 2 divot holes, and these have to be about, I guess, about 2 o'clock in order to line up with the pin that is sticking out on your cross member in the front. So we're going to get these pins lined up first. We'll get our U-bolts on there, get it all tightened up and torqued on correctly. Then I can tighten up my bolts on the end. But if I tighten these up first, I'm not going to be able to move this. It's going to make my installation tougher. Now, this is obviously a tough, ugly, dirty job, but I have confidence that you can do it. Take your time. Don't get frustrated. If you do, just set it down and let it sit for a while. Come back to it the next day, what have you. Because if you get a little too aggressive, you can bend these ears, and then you're going to have to mess with that. My name's David Welch. I'm at Brothers Tech Center every single week, making sure your truck gets back on the road, it's safe, and it's looking good too. I'll be back next Tuesday with more for you, so you make sure you subscribe and check us out on Facebook and Instagram too, because that's cool too.